Welcome back to another episode of the Miami Heat Roundtable. I'm your host, Amir, and I'm joined today by the entire crew. Plus, we have another special guest joining the program, David Ramil, the co-host of Locked On Heat. Thanks for joining us today, David.
Of course. Always a pleasure to talk Miami Heat basketball.
Let's go.
So, David, Pat Riley had his end-of-season press conference earlier this week, and there's a lot to unpack there. The main theme seemed to be around availability. He mentioned that multiple times, and that also relates to another thing that stood out to me, which was Jimmy Butler's contract extension. Pat said they have not discussed that extension during the offseason thus far. He also mentioned that they don't have to give him that extension this year and essentially can wait till next season and take a wait and see approach, which I think is interesting. So David, what scenario do you think is most likely to happen? You think the Heat will cave in and give Jimmy Butler his extension this offseason? Or do you think the Heat will wait until next season to offer that extension, like Pat said, is possibly an occurrence that can happen, which could, in theory, piss off Jimmy Butler and hypothetically cause him to not pick up his player option and leave the Miami Heat, essentially?
I don't think they'll offer him the extension, and certainly not for the price that we've heard regarding the full max, which is somewhere around the vicinity of $120 million for 2 years or something close to that. And so I don't think the Heat organization feels comfortable giving him that money whatsoever. So that's the least likely scenario, is that he's going to get the exact money that we've heard from his agent in terms of what he might want with this extension. Other than that, I think their preference would be the wait and see approach. That they know, or they can make some kind of promise to him and saying, look, we'll take care of you, but you've got to show us a little bit more than you did during this past regular season. As you pointed out, the availability factor is such an important one for this front office. They want to make sure that he plays more consistently, not just that he shows up, but that he's also engaged during these games, because there were a number of games where it didn't look like Jimmy was much of a factor and didn't seem like he was the kind of, changing the tide the way that he does during the postseason, the way that we've seen him in years past. Like he's getting up there in age, obviously, and he's no longer the productive player he once was. But even still, when he was out on the floor, he just didn't seem like he was affecting the game and impacting it to the same degree that he once had. So I think their preferred approach would be the wait and see one, where they see what he does during this season. They'll make whatever changes they can to improve the roster, although I don't think there are many available to them. So I don't see that as really a realistic option either. And then kind of figure it out next season where they can give him the extension, or at some amount that might be significantly lower than what he's asking for, or that what he's reportedly asking for, because we don't know. Like this could all change in July 7th. He could walk into that office with Bernie Lee, his agent, and be like, look, I want 2 years, $80 million. And the Heat will say, okay, that's a number we're comfortable with. And then the whole drama is resolved before it actually even happens. I don't think that's likely to happen, but that's one possibility.
And to follow up to that real quick, though, so by not giving him that extension right away, do you think that can make him disgruntled by any means? I know he said at the Grand Prix in Miami, like, sure, I want to win a championship, I want to be here and all that stuff. But do you think that's a possibility of like kind of souring the relationship if we don't extend it now?
I don't know. I'm not sure I can figure out Jimmy, and I don't think anybody can really. Like, he's been such an enigma from day one. And, we all have heard the stories about what he was like in Philadelphia and Minnesota, and certainly in Chicago. And the idea that he came to Miami, and a lot of people perceived him as this great locker room cancer that was impossible to work with, and nobody wanted to be his teammate, and he burnt bridges everywhere he goes. And then for 5 years, he's been mostly a model citizen, at least publicly. I've heard some things behind the scenes, but that's a whole other conversation. But as far as, whether or not he's going to make a big stink about it and be like, oh, pay me my money, I don't think that's who he is now either. I think he appreciates what this front office has done. I think he loves the team. I think he loves his teammates for the most part. I don't think he's going to make a big stink about it. But at the same time, I could see him just say, look, not even necessarily making a big stink about it, just saying, look, if you don't pay me or give me my extension, I just don't want to be here. So it might not be like this public, messy divorce, but it might still be a divorce nonetheless. So it's really, really tricky to kind of read where Jimmy is at this point, because he's got so many off the court interests and everything else like that. And like you said, he's seemed so happy here, and he does want to win here in Miami in a way that I don't think he necessarily wanted to win in Minnesota or Philadelphia. And so I think all things being equal, I think he would prefer to stay here in Miami, but it has to be for a much more reasonable price. So we'll see how it all plays out. I know that's kind of a lukewarm answer, but I can't really get a read on Jimmy and whether or not he's going to make that kind of a big stink, because I don't know that there are a lot of teams saying, I can't wait to add a 35-year-old star that's only going to play for 60 games a year and might not be healthy and pay him $60 million by the time he's 37. I don't know that there's a long list of suitors at this point in his career, because he's not KD. He's not a proven commodity in terms of like being able to produce 25 points per game. And he's certainly not a young player either. We saw this last year with Dame Lillard, who is a much better offensive player than Jimmy Butler. And it's not like there were a whole lot of teams saying, oh, we can't wait to add that guy at his age, despite the fact that he's a proven offensive player. So I don't know that there's going to be a long list of teams that are going to be trying to add a player like Jimmy at this point in his career.
Okay, so then David, do you believe then in like paying players for what they did in the past? Because yes, Jimmy Butler has been great, and we have given him the max. We've given him
Yeah.
$150 million. We signed his boy Kyle Lowry. We've been pretty lenient with him in terms of he does things that Bron and D Wade couldn't do. So when it comes to paying Jimmy Butler, like at that max deal, do you think they should do that? Because they also have to look at it from the franchise perspective, and they actually have to try to also lean into the future, but then also pay Jimmy Butler. So do you believe in just paying players for what they've done in the past?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I think, like, I'd love that to be the reality. And I mentioned this on an episode we just finished recording. Like, I mean, I am definitely pro player. I love when players go and get their money, whether it's through free agency or negotiations or anything like that. From a front office perspective, like, what does that mean? Like, I understand there was a perception around the league in 2016 that they didn't take care of Dwayne and he was their franchise player and everything else like that. But we all know what Dwayne was like in 2016, and he wasn't that kind of player that deserved that kind of money. You can't just pay a player based on their past impact. And I mentioned this in a recent episode. To my knowledge, and I've been following the league for a long time, that's only happened twice. Dirk Nowitzki in Dallas and Kobe Bryant in Los Angeles. And both those teams committed a lot of money to those two players, and they were in cap hell for a long time and didn't do anything for a number of years. They were both basically lottery-bound teams for a number of years. In Dallas's case, they only got out of it because of Luka Doncic. In Los Angeles, only because they added LeBron James. So I don't, to me, I don't think that's a decision they can afford to make.
You know what? It's really great, David, that you mentioned the whole thing with Dwayne Wade, because that's actually segueing to what I wanted to ask you. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't think Jimmy's going anywhere. I think the Heat are learning from what happened in 2016. They let Wade walk. With this Jimmy situation, they got to deal with it a little bit better, whether that's giving him the extension, talking to him with something lower. I think they're going to figure it out. So question I have for you, Damon, because I know a lot of people are talking about Jimmy. I know these Pat Riley comments is all about Ben Jimmy, but there was one comment that he mentioned that not a lot of people want to talk about, and not a lot of people are bringing up because everything's about Jimmy. This Tyler Herro fragile comment is what kind of caught my attention as well, the fragile comment. Yeah. Let's say, for example, because we know that Tyler Herro hasn't been the barrier of health in this team for 5 years now. So let's say, for example, we keep Jimmy. Let's say the Heat do give him the extension. How likely do you feel that Tyler Herro will be a member of the Miami Heat moving forward if we keep Jimmy?
I think they're going to try and explore a trade with Tyler, regardless of whether they keep Jimmy or not. I don't think that's a question. I just think we saw last summer specifically, what the market is for a player like Tyler Herro, and I don't think it's particularly good. So I don't think he's going to, a lot of people are saying, oh, Tyler for Donovan Mitchell. It's like, why the hell would Cleveland want that? Like, there's no, Tyler, if anything, and this is my perspective, he lost a lot of value this season, not only being hurt, and as Pat Riley said, calling him fragile. On top of that, in the playoffs, he showed that he can't just create scoring opportunities for himself. Like, I give credit to Boston, great defensive team, whatever, but they shut him down. They made him look like he was a non-essential player out there. He's not the guy to be what he thinks he is, which is a 1A on offense. He cannot be that leading scorer on a playoff contending team. And if that's the case, then he's just a complimentary role player, which is fine. Like, there are 400 guys in the league that are complimentary role players, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, he's going to have to swallow that jagged little pill. He's going to have to understand that it's not very easy to go out there and say, you know what, this is what I think I'm worth, and then you have to, if in a trade, you have to give up a key star player or anything like that. That's just not how it works out. So I think Tyler's gone one way or the other. I just don't know for what, because there's just not a lot of value for a player like that. And so you try to get what Miami needs more than anything else is a top scorer. They need somebody to carry the load offensively so that they don't have to struggle and fight in every possession and try and generate offense, which was so difficult for them to do over the course of the regular season and in the playoffs. Tyler's not that guy. Jimmy's not that guy at this point, and certainly not during the regular season. And Bam, with all of his responsibilities elsewhere, can't be that guy either. So that's what they have to go and get. And I don't know if trading Tyler is going to necessarily generate that, but I think you have to try and explore the market for him one way or the other.
Thank you.
David, man, nice to meet you once again. So a lot of people are talking about Jimmy and Tyler and stuff like that, but
yeah,
I'm going to go the direction about the NBA draft. It's around the corner, and when we talk about Miami Heat's recent picks, Jaime, Jovic, Tyler in 2019, 2017, and Bam, we have a solid draft pick selection. So
yeah.
I believe this year we have the 15th. And so my question is to you, David. I'm sure we're going to keep the pick, but if we don't or we do whatever, what's your top draft prospects if you have been looking into it, and what's one player that you would want the Miami Heat to draft this upcoming summer?
You got me on my weak spot there because I hate the draft, and maybe it's too many years covering the team. But to be honest with you, like the draft, I devalue draft picks so much because I think unless you're getting a top 5 pick, it's very rare that you're going to get an immediately impactful player that's going to change the course of your franchise. And I think we see that more often than not. So I have not started any kind of draft research whatsoever. I know we're only a few weeks away, so I've got to get into it. I don't know what kind of pick Miami is looking to make. I think, honestly, they've gotten a more ready-made player in Jaime Jaquez last year, obviously. The year before that, they took a big chance on a project in Jovic. I think they go back to that. I think they're going to look for somebody that's going to be more of a developmental project. And I don't know who that is because, again, I haven't really done much research on it. I think they're looking for somebody who could turn into that complementary, or maybe not even a complementary, like a 1A type scorer. I don't know who that guy is, and I certainly don't know if you can find him at 15, but I think that's their priority. I don't think it's a big man. I know some people have theorized Zach Edey or whatever. I don't see that guy having NBA level mobility and athleticism where he could be an impactful player. So, I mean, if you've got a name, I'd love to hear it because I don't really have an opinion on it just yet.
Yeah, I understand definitely. So my next question would be for you, David. Everybody has this offseason dream of we want Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant, all these names are getting thrown out there, Brandon Ingram. What's your what's your realistic off season for the Miami Heat, and then what's your dream realistic target off season for the Miami Heat, like a realistic one and like a one that you want to happen, but there's a good chance it probably won't happen.
I think realistically, run it back. Again, I don't know that there's a huge market for Tyler. I think you can talk yourself as a front office or even as a fan of the team and be like, listen, you know what? Jimmy takes a full off season and gets healthy. Bam adds a little bit more to his bag and stretches the floor a little bit more consistently. Tyler gets healthy. Terry Rozier gets healthy. And that's, that was the whole rationale behind acquiring Rozier in the first place, is that he was supposed to be the guy to provide some scoring so that Bam and Jimmy could do what they do defensively. And then between him and Rozier and Herro, you've got a good scoring base there. It just didn't work out. Terry got hurt. He was, adjusting. It was a long period for him. So I think realistically, they're going to look to make a whole bunch of improvements. I just don't see any of them happening. You mentioned KD. Phoenix isn't trading him. You could call Phoenix and say, oh, listen, what do you want for KD? And they're going to be like, nothing. You want Bradley Beal instead? That's really, I think, somebody that they would be much more willing to unload, considering he struggled the way he did in the playoffs and he's making even more money. So I think that would be their first priority. So for Miami's perspective, I don't know that you're going to have a lot of other options. You're going to have your draft picks, but they're good, not great. So they don't offer much value to other teams. And you've got your young players in Jaime and Nicola, and they're fine. But again, like they fit in Miami's system. I don't know that you trade Jaime Jaquez to any team and he's going to turn into a star. And I think you can make the same argument for Jovic as well. So realistically, I don't know that they've got a lot of options. And I said this right after the season ended too. It's like, you know, your best path for making the kind of improvements that you need to rebuild to get towards title contention by having a top 5 player in order to take you there is by trading Bam Adebayo. And I don't think Miami wants to do that. And I don't know what you're going to get for Jimmy either. You could get, you know, and this is more in towards my dream scenario here. Yeah. I think somehow you find a way to acquire Donovan Mitchell. And I think he can be that guy. Like I've liked Mitchell since the draft. I liked him and his fit in Miami. I thought he was a guy who could take over and slide in immediately for the absence of Dwayne Wade. I thought that was the right fit for Miami at the time. And I still think he's the right fit for Miami. I just don't know how you can acquire him. Like one, it's going to require him to ask out, which that's not a guarantee. Cleveland has to want whatever Miami can offer. And they have to accept Miami's bid over New York, over a whole bunch of other teams that have much more picks and can acquire a player of Mitchell's quality. So I don't know, man. Like, honestly, there's just not a clear path for me. Like, I know a lot of people think of Miami and be like, oh, they're always active. They always can get their guy. I just don't see it right now. So I think, to me, it's much more realistic that Miami just winds up running it back. But if there's a dream scenario, it's acquiring Mitchell and somehow keeping your core intact, including Jimmy.
So if we do run it back, that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about the Pat Riley presser. He was talking about availability is a big theme, and I don't know how we can change that or control that necessarily, right? Like, because if we did have more players available, not just Jimmy, Tyler, Caleb missed 15, Bam 12, like Kevin Love missed 20. Like if we had some of those guys during the regular season, we were only 4 games from the 2nd seed, 2 games from the 5th seed or whatever it was. So yeah, availability. So I don't know. Do you think, and a lot of people were talking about Pat Riley seemed like he's back, he's more cutthroat, he's more frank and blunt and forward. Like, has Miami Heat culture become a little soft in terms of like allowing players to rest with load management? And like, I know that's the culture of the NBA. I'm the senior citizen of the group, David. So yeah, 80s, 90s basketball, you could look at almost any player. Isaiah Thomas, Patrick Ewing, Zoe, John Stockton, Jordan. They played 82, 8 to 10 times. Like they were Iron Men back then. Like I even looked at Grant Hill, who was his career, someone that's close to Jimmy, kind of, you know, that like 6'7", small forward, kind of a similar game to a certain degree. His career derailed by injuries, but he played 38 games in 4 seasons, guys, for the younger folks here who didn't realize that. But he got traded from Orlando to Phoenix, age 35 to 38, 82, 81, 80 games. Like, how is he able to play 80 games after his career was derailed? And Jimmy and other players in general across the NBA aren't able to do that. So, like, how can we become more available? Like, can we go back to the old Heat culture where we like force players to play at 70% or more? Because Pat even said it. He's like, no one's ever 100%. Like, giving awards for playing 65 games means you can miss 17 games theoretically. So what are your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I agree. I feel like that is kind of a, you know, endemic of the whole league, as you pointed out. Like there are a lot of players that feel like load managing is more important to them. And we're starting to see, conversely, you're starting to see more longevity too. So I think that's the idea, is like you can be an NBA player for a lot longer if you wind up taking games off during the course of your, you know, the earlier portions of your career. So I'm curious to see how that all plays out over the next 20, 30 years, whether or not we see players have longer careers, more typical, like, you know, LeBron James and things of that sort. Like he's a very, very strange, unique case, obviously, but I wonder if we're going to start to see more players that are playing well in their mid-30s. We don't see it right now, but it could be the change that happens over the next few years. As far as whether or not they can get players more available this upcoming season, he talked about wide sweeping analysis of everything they do, not just the training staff and everything else like that, but, you know, maybe it's just roster changes. Like, again, like I said, you know, they need somebody who's going to be your top scorer, who can be your go-to bucket getter, to make things so much easier so that you don't have to work so hard on every possession just to generate a bad look from, you know, Haywood Highsmith in the corner or something like that. That you need something a little bit more consistent. That's why they went after Dame Lillard last year. That's why they've gone after Kevin Durant and everybody else. So they're trying. Excuse me for a second. I got a cough. Sorry about that.
No worries.
So they're trying to make these changes, and I don't know exactly how they can go about doing it. I mean, you could have UD in the locker room, and he can basically just yell at you and say, don't be, get out there and play. But I don't know if that's something that's realistic either. So they're going to try to. I think they can work some kind of incentives into Jimmy's contract where he winds up playing a certain number of games, and maybe that's the kind of balance that they'll find. Getting him to play a certain number of games per season. If he meets those, that's how he gets a certain amount of money. Maybe that's one way of doing it. But you look at Tyler, he was actually hurt. And he at 24, 25, he does seem fragile, as Pat Riley called it. So I'm not sure what they can do, but I do think it's something that's much more league wide. And I don't know that there are any kind of immediate changes. I think you talk to old heads, and they'll say, just go out and play through it. You get these little injuries over the course of a year. It's no big deal. And maybe young guys nowadays are soft, but at the same time, I think they're trying to preserve their career so that they can have longer, more extensive playing days. I don't know how it works out, and I don't know how Miami can find that balance next year, but obviously it's a priority. They need to find somebody who can take away some of the load offensively, maybe get an actual big in there, like a 7-footer, so that, you don't have Bam being undersized and going up against centers and running around all over the court, which adds to certain wear and tear. He's going to the Olympics this year. That's going to add more playing time. I know these guys play and train during the offseason anyway, but between the travel and everything else like that, now we're talking about a guy who's already missed games this year. He's going to have this full-time summer commitment. Is he going to be healthy for a full 82 games next year? I don't think so. I think we could probably already guess that Bam's going to miss sometime next year just because that's the norm when players commit to these offseason regimens. So we'll see how it all plays out.
Well, David, thank you so much for hopping on and joining us today for this episode. We really appreciate it. We're all fans of the Locked On Heat YouTube channel and podcast, so I'm sure everybody that's following us does follow you guys, but if not, go to Locked On Heat on YouTube, subscribe to their channel, follow their podcast. Really appreciate it. Is there anywhere else you want to let the audience know where they can find you?
No, that's it. You can go on YouTube, anywhere you get podcasts, and we're there. So we'll be providing content all summer long. We'll be in Las Vegas for Summer League, and we'll see how it plays out in the draft and everything else in free agency. Last year, obviously, we had a big summer and it didn't pan out, but we'll see if Miami can make some moves this offseason. I'm not optimistic, but you never know. You never count out Pat Riley 100%.
No way.
Thank you again. Thanks so much, guys. Take care.
Thanks again. Take care, David.
Take care.